She sat in 9A, her long black hair falling loose around her shoulders, a faded hoodie draped over her slender frame, and a small, well-worn canvas bag resting on her lap. Rachel looked every bit like one of the hundreds of other passengers on Flight 472, except for the depths in her eyes, fixed intently on the window as she watched the angry gray clouds churning outside. The plane lurched violently as it plunged into turbulence, as if an invisible hand were shaking the fuselage high above the ground. Gasps and nervous whispers rippled through the cabin. In that moment, Rachel leaned forward, her gaze flicking to the strained expression on the face of flight attendant Cindy as she hurried past row 9. "Cindy," Rachel said, her voice calm but clear. "The cabin pressure is dropping quickly." Cindy halted and reluctantly turned around. Her eyes skimmed over Rachel's bare makeup, free face, her tangled black hair, and simple attire. Then a forced smile curved Cindy's lips as she replied coolly, "Ma'am, please remain in your seat. Our professional crew is handling everything. There's no need to worry yourself." Her words carried a subtle note of mockery, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Several heads turned toward Rachel, curiosity and doubt mixed on their faces. Across the aisle, a young white man in a shiny tracksuit sneered, "Maybe she thinks she's some secret pilot or something?" His friend laughed loudly. "Yeah, maybe she's going to fly us all to Atlantis." A ripple of laughter spread from seat to seat, honing in on Rachel and making her an unwanted center of attention. From behind came a sharp, cold voice. "Excuse me, but now is hardly the time for people like you to pretend you know what you're talking about. We paid for a ticket, not a show." It was Ashley, a white woman in her early 40s, her golden hair perfectly coiffed, wearing an expensive designer suit in crimson, polished nails that broadcast her status. Her steely gaze swept over Rachel with undisguised contempt. Rachel said nothing. Her fingers tightened slightly on the strap of her canvas bag, but her face remained composed. Through her thin-framed glasses, her eyes returned to the tempest outside, where the sky roiled more angrily than ever. The shaking intensified, prompting a few terrified cries. Somewhere in the back rows, children began to sob. Panic was beginning to take hold. "Why is she just sitting there?" barked Todd, a well-to-do middle-aged man in a sleek black suit and silk tie. "Like she knows everything that's going on. Nobody should trust someone like her." When Todd said "someone like her," his tone dripped with malice, a pointed reference to her race and appearance, as if her very presence threatened their safety. A few affluent passengers around him nodded in agreement, their eyes flicking toward Rachel with thinly veiled hostility. Still, Rachel remained silent. She smoothed an imaginary crease in her bag as though counting each passing second of an unseen battle. The whispers and snide remarks continued. A man seated near Ashley couldn't help but add, "No offense, but clearly she doesn't belong in this part of the plane. How'd she even afford a ticket?" An elderly woman with silver hair chimed in, her expression sour. "Exactly. I told you we shouldn't have people like that flying with us." Rachel heard every jeer and slur, but she did not respond. No anger, no defense. Only a flicker of sadness crossed her face before she recentered herself in calm resolve. She understood that words wouldn't change minds, especially those already locked in prejudice. She knew she would need to stand up and do what was right, but only when the moment was right. Again, the plane lurched more violently, an urgent alarm sounding somewhere near the cockpit. Rachel gripped her bag's strap, determination glinting in her eyes. She knew the time to act was drawing near, regardless of what anyone thought. Up the aisle, Cindy hurried by again, her face pale and hands trembling. Proof that the situation was far more serious than anyone knew. Rachel followed her with a steely gaze, ready to do exactly what she knew had to be done next, undeterred by the prejudice and barbs surrounding her. Rachel watched Cindy's figure intently, trying to read the flight attendant's expression. Then, without warning, the plane was rocked by the fiercest jolt yet, so violent it felt as if the aircraft had been shoved sideways. Overhead, bins rattled open. A small suitcase tumbled onto the aisle with a crash, and screams and panicked cries erupted all at once. "Mommy, I'm scared," sobbed a child from a few rows back, the sound twisting in everyone's chest. A young mother clutched her child, her face drawn with terror as she surveyed the chaos. The shaking continued, each lurch like a hammer blow against the fuselage. At that moment, the cockpit door burst open. First Officer Daniel rushed into the cabin, urgency etched on his face. He scanned the rows, his voice tense but as calm as he could manage. "This is serious. We need someone on board with flight experience or aerospace expertise. If you've ever served in the military, speak up now." The cabin fell silent under the weight of his words. Faces that had been screaming moments before went still, confused. Cindy hurried over to Daniel, her features tight with anxiety. Leaning in, she murmured, but loud enough for a few nearby passengers to hear, There's a woman in 9A who warned about cabin pressure before things got this bad. I'm not sure, but she might know something." Daniel's gaze snapped to Rachel, a mixture of seriousness and hope in his eyes. Before he could speak, a sharp female voice cut through the hush. "Wait a minute, are you joking? You want her to help us?" Ashley had leapt from her seat. Her perfect blonde hair and designer suit stood in stark contrast to the pandemonium around her, her voice deliberately loud so everyone could hear. "Look closely, Daniel. A black woman dressed like she just wandered out of the slums. Have you lost your mind? Why should we entrust our lives to someone like her?" She swept her gaze across her fellow affluent passengers, fishing for agreement. A few nodded. Others looked away. Rachel said nothing, her face unnervingly calm, though her hand gripped the strap of her small canvas bag a little tighter. Daniel frowned, fighting to stay composed under the mounting pressure. He took a step toward Rachel, clearly intending to ask for her help. But before he could speak, Todd, a large man in a tailored suit and silk tie, strode forward to block the aisle. "No way," Todd's voice boomed, each word edged with scorn. Who in their right mind would hand control of this plane to her, some unknown black woman in rags like that? Pull yourself together, pilot. Todd's words sliced through the chaos, redirecting every hostile gaze to Rachel. Some passengers now looked at her with fear, as if she were a threat rather than a potential savior. Murmurs and sobs swelled again. Cindy whispered to Daniel, her voice trembling, "Daniel, you have to think about this. People don't want to trust someone they don't know, especially when she looks like that." Daniel clenched his fists, eyes flicking between Todd, Ashley, and then back to Rachel. Rachel met his stare, her calm confidence unwavering, as if she were ready for whatever came next. A few neighbors watched her curiosity, but none spoke. An older woman in a purple coat muttered loudly enough for Rachel to hear, "Please, dear, don't play the hero. Just sit down and let us feel safe." Rachel sighed softly, a fleeting sadness in her eyes. Yet beneath it, a fierce determination glimmered. At that instant, the plane shuddered again, more violently than before, sending several passengers lurching from their seats. Screams rose in a fresh wave of terror. Daniel looked around one last time, then fixed his gaze on Rachel with desperate urgency. "I'm begging you, Time's up. If you can help, do it now." The cabin seemed to freeze as every eye turned to her, awaiting an answer from the woman they had just mocked and mistrusted. Slowly, Rachel stood and slung her canvas bag over her shoulder. She looked straight into Daniel's eyes and in a clear, strong voice amid the chaos said, "I'll do what I can." She stepped forward, each stride measured and resolute, prejudice and insults dissolving behind her. But Todd still stood in her path, his glare daring her to come closer, and ready to stop her by any means. Rachel stepped forward slowly but resolutely toward Todd, her small canvas bag swinging lightly on her shoulder, as if untouched by the chaos surrounding her. Her gaze remained serene, completely unshaken by Todd's towering frame, blocking the cockpit doorway. His eyes blazed with arrogant challenge, certain she would be forced to stop under his pressure. When she was just a few paces away, Rachel paused. She lifted her chin and fixed Todd with a look sharper and clearer than any words she could muster. "You've just wasted 2 precious minutes on prejudice. That's enough time to lose a wing." Her words rang through the cabin like a tolling bell, and the tension instantly drained from the air. For the first time since boarding, Todd hesitated at her cold, incisive warning. Anger and confusion flickered across his face before he masked them with his usual haughty smirk and replied sarcastically, "You really think some scare tactic from someone like you will make me step aside? Sorry, but I'm not stupid enough to believe you can do anything." Nearby, passengers fell silent, holding their breath as they watched the standoff between Rachel and Todd. Ashley stood beside him, her triumphant gaze betraying her satisfaction at his insult. She leaned over and whispered loudly enough for Rachel to hear. "She's acting like some kind of superhero. It's laughable she thinks she has any right to give orders here." A few snickers rose behind Ashley, deepening the oppressive atmosphere. Rachel said nothing, simply staring at Todd with unwavering firmness, as if his words were dust unworthy of her concern. Todd lifted his chin defiantly, arms folded across his chest to block the cockpit entrance. "You'd best go back to your seat and stop making this worse. We don't need help from someone like you." Rachel inhaled softly, her eyes flashing with newfound steel. At that moment, the plane shuddered violently again, so sudden and forceful that Todd staggered forward, nearly losing his balance. Seizing the opportunity, Rachel slipped by him on the left and strode straight for the cockpit door. Todd froze, his face flushing with anger and shame. He spun to speak, but Daniel stepped in front of him, his gaze as firm as an iron gate. "She's coming in at my request," Daniel stated coolly, leveling a warning glance at Todd. "Please take your seat and let us handle this emergency." Todd ground his teeth but could only step aside, defeated. Ashley watched, rage and disappointment on her face, yet she remained silent. Rachel passed through the cockpit door and immediately secured it behind her. Inside, Captain Miller was bent over the control panel, his hands trembling as he fought to stabilize the aircraft. When he looked up, surprise and panic flickered across his face at seeing Rachel. "Who are you?" Miller asked, his voice tight with tension and disbelief. Rachel moved straight to the instrument panel, her keen eyes scanning the displays. Then, in a voice that cut through the chaos like a command, she said, "Night Viper 9, requesting navigation support." Captain Miller froze, eyes wide. His voice shook as he tried to process it. "Night Viper 9. My God, there's only one person who ever used that call sign. You're Rachel Evans, the one who disappeared on that top-secret mission in Oregon." Rachel didn't answer immediately. She simply nodded once, then focused on the controls. Her hands moved swiftly and expertly, as if she'd never left the cockpit. Every gesture radiated confidence and professionalism, leaving Miller watching in awe. "The system is reporting incorrect altitude and cabin pressure," Rachel instructed briskly, her tone calm yet authoritative. "We're about 800 feet higher than indicated. Switch to echo wave for accurate readings immediately." Miller swallowed hard, then followed her directions, and quickly confirmed everything she said was spot on. In the passenger cabin, the mood had shifted from tense to near hysteria. Todd and Ashley sat frozen, their faces pale as the situation slipped beyond their control. They never expected the unassuming black woman they had cruelly mocked to be the legendary military pilot, and their only hope of survival. Daniel stood guard by the cockpit door, determined to prevent further interference. Inside, he silently prayed Rachel could resolve the crisis, feeling a growing tide of regret and shame for underestimating her. As the plane continued to jolt violently, Rachel Evans remained composed in the cockpit, her focus unwavering as she executed every critical move in the life or death mission before her. In the cockpit, the air was still thick with tension as Rachel swiftly reviewed the readings on the control panel. Her eyes tracked every piece of data on the screens, her concentration so intense that Captain Miller couldn't help feeling both admiration and a bit of confusion at the professional speed and precision with which this woman, who'd only just arrived, was handling the crisis. Rachel reached out to flip a few switches, then paused at the altitude display. Her voice rang out calm but crystal clear, without a hint of hesitation. "The cabin pressure and altitude sensors have been critically disrupted. The instruments are reading about 800 feet lower than our actual altitude, enough to put us in serious danger if we don't correct it immediately." Miller frowned at the display. Every number matched Rachel's assessment. A wave of relief and renewed faith in her expertise washed over him as he realized she truly knew what she was doing. But at that crucial moment, the ground radio crackled to life, shattering the fragile silence. A firm, authoritative voice spoke over the cockpit intercom. "We've received reports that an unauthorized passenger is manipulating your flight controls. Captain Miller, please confirm immediately." The voice belonged to Officer Blake, the airline's senior ground security officer. Rachel's brow furrowed slightly. She remained focused on the instruments, but she felt the weight of fresh scrutiny. Miller glanced at her, concern and doubt flickering in his eyes. After a tense beat, he lifted the microphone and replied, his tone strained. "Blake, yes, we are being assisted by a passenger. The situation is dire, and she knows exactly what she's doing." Officer Blake's tone sharpened instantly. "That's impossible. Our records show this woman is Rachel Evans, a former military pilot whose service records were expunged after a major national security scandal. She is not qualified and poses a serious risk to flight operations. You must immediately remove her from control and return her to a passenger seat." Blake's words hit Miller like a blow. He hesitated, staring at Rachel. Her eyes briefly flickered with hurt at the accusation. Then her gaze hardened, firm and resolute. She adjusted a dial on the panel and spoke deliberately, her voice carrying quiet authority. "That's true. My military record was erased. But believe me, it has nothing to do with my current ability to fly or manage this crisis. I was erased because I had the courage to expose systemic racism within the Air Force." Captain Miller's eyes widened, a mix of surprise, doubt, and new respect on his face. "You exposed them? What exactly happened?" Rachel kept her focus on the controls, her voice dropping as though she were revisiting painful memories. "I was the top pilot in my Special Operations Unit. On a classified mission in Oregon, my wingman was killed because our command refused to dispatch support. I reported the commander for racial discrimination, valuing the lives of black airmen like us, and instead of justice, I was attacked, forced out of service, and scrubbed from every record." She paused, her eyes blazing with fierce determination. "But that doesn't change my skills or experience. I am still a professional pilot, ready to help you through this emergency." Miller was silent, unsure how to respond. Though he'd heard rumors of that old scandal, seeing the woman herself right in front of him stirred genuine admiration. But Officer Blake's voice crackled through again, unyielding. "I'll say it once more. We will not allow someone who's been stricken from the defense roster to control this aircraft. Captain Miller, you must revoke her access now." Rachel met Miller's gaze, her tone calm yet unambiguous. "Trust me. If you follow those orders, this entire plane could go down. We don't have time." Miller stared into her earnest, confident eyes, then nodded decisively. "I believe you. Do whatever you must to get us safely on the ground." He turned back to the mic and spoke with firm resolve. "I, Captain Miller, take full responsibility for this decision. Rachel Evans will continue to manage flight controls until we land safely. That is my order." On the other end, Officer Blake erupted in angry protest, but Miller cut the connection. He looked back at Rachel, calm restored, and offered a respectful nod. "It's all in your hands now, Night Viper 9. Rachel inclined her head and returned to the controls, her hands moving with practiced precision as she locked onto the task before her, determined to transcend the shadow of her past and the prejudice around her to save the hundreds of lives depending on her. While Rachel focused on handling the emergency in the cockpit, chaos in the cabin spiraled completely out of control. The din of panic grew louder by the second. Frantic whispers tangled with cries of fear, turning the cabin into a nerve-racking cacophony. Todd, having returned to his seat, sat scowling, his lips pressed into a thin line of displeasure. He swept his gaze across the cabin with undisguised contempt aimed at the cockpit door. Then, suddenly, he leapt to his feet again, turning to Ashley and the nearby passengers, his voice booming with agitation. "I can't believe this. We really let some random black woman fly this plane? Do none of you see how absurd that is?" Ashley snapped her head in agreement, her tone icy as she gestured wildly with her long, red, painted nails for emphasis. "Exactly. How could we be stupid enough to entrust our lives to someone the military doesn't even trust? Someone they wiped from their records? Who's to say she isn't dangerous?" Her words instantly ignited another wave of panic. Passengers exchanged wide-eyed glances, their murmurs of doubt swelling. A middle-aged woman nearby, who'd been soothing her little daughter, began to tremble as she turned to Todd, pleading, "What are we supposed to do now? Just let her keep flying the plane. What if she screws up?" Todd crossed his arms, a smug, triumphant smirk spreading across his face, clearly savoring the power he wielded over their emotions. "Exactly my point. We need to shut this down before it's too late. I don't know about you, but I sure as hell can't trust someone the Army tossed aside. If she wasn't fit to serve our country, how can she protect us?" A few shaky agreements echoed around him, making the tension in the cabin even more suffocating. Ashley leaned in with a cold, calculating smile, and added another jab. "That's right, who really knows her past? Anyone kicked out of the military must have done something really bad. I wouldn't put it past her to be using this crisis for her own ends." Todd nodded forcefully, fueling the cabin's hysteria. "Exactly. She's manipulating us. Don't fall for that weak act." The atmosphere grew even more claustrophobic. Some passengers began shouting demands for Rachel to leave the cockpit immediately, while others pressed the flight attendants with panicked, trembling questions. Why should we trust her? Get her back here. Don't let her ruin everything. In one corner, a young white man named Mike, who'd been glued to his phone screen all flight, suddenly saw a golden opportunity for viral fame. He raised his phone, pointed it at the cockpit door and the frenzied crowd, and began recording with an excited grin. "Hey, everyone, I'm on Flight 472, and things are insane. A mysterious black woman just walked into the cockpit, even though she's supposedly scrubbed from military records. Passengers here are freaking out, thinking she's up to no good. What do you think? Is she playing us?" Mike panned the camera over Todd and Ashley's enraged faces, capturing every moment of their outrage. Recognizing he was on film, Todd seized the chance to stoke the frenzy. "Share this video everywhere. Demand she get out of that cockpit now. Our lives are in the hands of a total stranger." Shouts and protests reached a fever pitch. Todd and Ashley had turned the cabin into a chaotic stage, and Cindy and the other flight attendants were powerless to calm the storm of hysteria they'd ignited. Meanwhile, Mike quickly uploaded the footage to social media, breathless with excitement. "This is unreal. This is going viral for sure. A mysterious black pilot, erased from military records, just commandeered a packed flight. It's like something out of an action movie." More and more passengers fed off Todd and Ashley's fear-mongering. The cabin slipped into uncontrollable panic. Those who'd stayed quiet before now openly voiced their suspicion. Then, as if on cue, the plane jolted violently again, one last warning that their time was running out. But Todd and Ashley remained unmoved, blind to the peril their prejudice and provocation were bringing down upon them all. While chaos raged in the cabin, inside the cockpit, Rachel remained intensely focused on the controls before her. Her hands moved deftly, slender fingers yet seasoned, toggling switches with precision and decisiveness, as if she'd rehearsed every motion 1,000 times. She glanced at Captain Miller, who watched her every move with a mix of tension, curiosity, and a hint of apprehension. "The pressure sensors are still unstable," Rachel said quickly but clearly, her eyes never leaving the display. "We need to switch to Echo Wave immediately. It's old navigation tech, but reliable. It can give us an accurate altitude." Captain Miller hesitated for a moment. Echo Wave was antiquated, seldom used by modern pilots. Yet, faced with Rachel's unshakable confidence, he decided to trust this stranger one more time. He drew a deep breath and nodded firmly. "All right, let's engage Echo Wave. I'll support you however I can." Rachel gave a slight nod, then skillfully activated the Echo Wave system. Instantly, the screen lit up with simple but clear terrain lines, a rough but accurate profile of the landscape below. Miller watched in astonishment and growing admiration. He'd never seen anyone so effortlessly command technology that had been gathering dust. A burning curiosity flared within him about this mysterious woman he'd met less than half an hour ago. Sensing his attention, Rachel offered a brief explanation as she continued stabilizing the aircraft. "Echo Wave was my constant companion during military missions. Sometimes older, simpler tech outperforms modern systems that can fail at the worst times." Miller nodded, his first real expression of trust since Rachel entered the cockpit. He turned back to the instruments and saw the readings steadily returning to normal under her expert guidance. In that moment, he was convinced she was the only person capable of getting them through this crisis. But then the ground radio crackled again, slicing through the tense hush. Officer Blake's voice came over, harsh and impatient. "Captain Miller, we still see Rachel Evans controlling the flight. I demand you revoke her control immediately. This is a direct order from ground security." Miller glanced at Rachel, indecision flickering across his face. She remained unwavering, her eyes shining with determination. Gently, she adjusted another setting, then turned to Miller and spoke calmly, but with steely resolve. "I know you're under immense pressure, but trust me. If you follow Blake's orders now, this aircraft will lose any chance of a safe landing. Rely on my expertise, Captain." Miller looked deep into her sincere, confident eyes and realized there was no more time to waste. He gripped the microphone and spoke into the radio with clear authority. "Blake, I am the highest authority on this flight, and I have full confidence in Rachel Evans' abilities. She will continue to assist me until we have the situation completely under control." Officer Blake's voice erupted with anger and impatience. "You're making a grave mistake, Miller. She was erased from military records. She's dangerous. Think again, now." But Miller cut the transmission without responding. He turned back to Rachel, his gaze resolute, and said softly, yet firmly, "We're doing this together, Night Viper 9. Rachel offered a faint, grateful smile, the first sign of appreciation for Miller's trust. Then she refocused on her task, her hands flying back to the controls to bring the plane steadily back under command. In the cabin below, pandemonium still reigned. Todd and Ashley continued stirring doubt and fear with their malicious rumors, and Mike kept filming every tense moment for social media. Passengers' faith eroded further, their panic intensifying. Rachel knew the pressure bearing down on her, but in her mind there was no room for prejudice or doubt. She was fighting unseen forces, suspicion, slander, and the cruel weight of her past. Yet she refused to waver. She calmly guided the plane, confident that only skill, resolve, and courage could prevail, and most importantly, bring every passenger safely home. At the same time, Captain Miller's faith in his decision solidified. He understood their fragile bond of trust hung by a thread, but he was determined to hold on to it with everything he had, hoping it would carry them through this life and death ordeal. While Rachel maintained absolute focus at the controls, balancing immense pressure in the cockpit against the ground crew's doubts, the cabin chaos showed no sign of abating. Sharp arguments rang out and fear rippled like an invisible, violent tide. Just then, Harold, a silver-haired, calm-eyed, elderly man, struggled to keep his composure amid the frenzy. Seated just behind where Rachel had been, he noticed her small canvas bag left behind on 9A, as if she'd rushed off and forgotten it. Half from curiosity, half from instinct, Harold retrieved the bag and opened it to look inside. Among her simple, personal items, he found a worn, leather, bound journal. As he flipped through the pages, he realized the neat professional handwriting detailed flight logs, and military flight logs at that. Each mission was recorded meticulously, with technical specifications and coordinates to the smallest detail. Harold frowned in astonishment. This was the logbook of a veteran pilot, someone who'd flown military aircraft in the harshest conditions. The sharp, concise mission notes made it clear the author was an extraordinarily skilled professional. Stunned by his discovery, Harold stood and raised his voice above the cabin's clamor to get everyone's attention. "Please, everyone, listen. We were wrong to judge that woman so quickly. I've just found her military flight journal. Rachel Evans is a veteran pilot who served in the Air Force and has years of experience flying through life, threatening situations." His words hushed several passengers who turned to him with surprised, wary looks. But Todd, seated nearby, sprang to his feet with a mocking sneer. "Oh, come on, old man. What does some tattered notebook prove? Anyone can scribble a few notes and call themselves a pilot." Ashley chimed in immediately, her red, painted lips curling with contempt as she glared at Harold. "Exactly. You seriously expect us to trust some unknown black woman who was stricken from military records? She must have a serious problem, and you think a little book changes that?" Harold's brow tightened at their vicious remarks, but he refused to be cowed. He opened the journal wide and held it aloft so everyone could see. "I'm not here for pointless arguments. This is unmistakably a military mission log. There are classified details only a genuine military pilot would know. She's clearly a professional, and right now we need to trust her instead of indulging in pointless, prejudiced bickering." A few passengers exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from doubt to thoughtful hesitation. Some even felt regret for the cruel words they'd shouted in panic. Yet Todd and Ashley dug in their heels. Sensing their support slipping away, they redoubled their agitation. Todd's voice rang out, sharper than before. "Are you really going to gamble your lives on someone like her? An unknown black woman kicked out of the Air Force? She's obviously untrustworthy. Everything about this is shady," Ashley added with undisguised scorn. "Todd's right. Stay rational, people. Don't let a moment's emotion cost you your sanity. A little notebook doesn't turn someone discarded by the military into a hero." Mike, the young man still filming, swung his phone toward Todd and Ashley, eager to capture their vitriol for social media. The cabin felt suffocating, a tug-of war between vicious doubts and the fragile sparks of newfound belief. Harold remained standing, journal in hand, his gaze steady and earnest. He knew he had to try one more time, for this wasn't an ordinary quarrel but a fight against the prejudices and racism that lay buried in many hearts. He took a slow, deep breath and spoke softly yet powerfully, hoping to reach those still unconvinced. "We are all adults. Remember that a person's skin color or past doesn't determine their ability or character. Rachel Evans is doing everything she can to bring us home safely. Right now, our only choice is to stop judging and start trusting her." Suddenly, the cabin fell into an uncanny silence. Harold's sincere words seeped into every passenger's heart and mind. Todd and Ashley fell silent, their faces tight with discomfort as they realized their campaign of fear was losing its grip in the face of truth and genuine faith. In that stillness, many passengers looked inward for the first time, recognizing that their own doubts and prejudices were the real danger, not the mysterious woman fighting to keep their flight aloft amid the storm. The thoughtful hush that had settled over the cabin was shattered as the plane lurched more violently than ever before. Every whisper and argument was instantly swallowed by the raging storm outside, as if to prove that none of them had any control over what was happening. Inside the cockpit, Rachel's expression remained steely as she focused intently on the controls before her. Each movement was executed with absolute precision, even as her hands tensed under nature's immense pressure. Torrential rain pounded the fuselage, fierce winds howled like beasts, and every low pressure gust fought to wrench the aircraft off course. Rachel drew a deep breath and quickly scanned the echo wave display, where altitude readings and terrain coordinates scrolled continuously. She tightened her grip on the yoke, adjusted the bank to reduce wind resistance, and quietly relayed parameters for Captain Miller's assistants beside her. "We need to slow to 250 knots, left wing 3 degrees, and prepare to descend another 400 feet to clear the worst turbulence," Rachel said, her tone concise but unmistakable. Miller followed her instructions immediately, feeling the seamless teamwork and his confidence in Rachel solidify as he watched her masterful handling of the plane in this savage storm. Meanwhile, in the passenger cabin, the urgency of the situation settled in. Some began to realize that their initial doubts and prejudices about Rachel were far more dangerous than the woman who was risking everything to save them. Mike, who'd been filming every moment with his phone, suddenly paused. His hand trembled as he lowered the device and looked toward the cockpit. For the first time since takeoff, he reflected on his actions. The cruel, prejudiced comments Todd and Ashley had made, the chaos he'd helped spread online, and felt a wave of shame. He bowed his head, remorse crashing over him. Mike chastised himself for letting fear and bias sweep him away. Glancing at his phone one last time, he switched it off. He knew now the only thing he could do was stay seated, trust Rachel, and pray she could save everyone on board. Todd and Ashley, though the cabin was much quieter, still clung to their doubts. Ashley leaned over and whispered to Todd, hanging on to her prejudices to the very end. "Todd, can we really trust her? I still don't feel safe letting someone like that fly the plane." Todd frowned, his voice weaker than before, perhaps sensing the error of his ways despite himself. "I don't know, Ashley, I just don't know. But what choice do we have now?" As they hesitated, Harold quietly approached Mike, placing a reassuring hand on the young man's shoulder. His gaze was gentle but serious. "Son, sometimes we have to make mistakes to grow. What matters is recognizing that mistake and having the courage to correct it." Mike looked up, emotion in his eyes. "I'm truly sorry. I was wrong to help spread those hateful words." Harold nodded warmly. "It's never too late to make amends. Right now, we must put our trust in Rachel. She's doing everything she can for us." Moments later, the plane lurched violently again, but this time every passenger fell silent, their eyes fixed on the cockpit door with fresh faith and hope. The prejudices and cruel remarks that had filled the cabin now felt small and meaningless compared to the survival of the hundreds of lives aboard. Back in the cockpit, Rachel steered them through the storm's fiercest core. Her eyes shone with determination when she spotted a narrow gap in the dark cloud bank encircling the aircraft. She knew a single misstep could spell disaster. "Hold steady," she murmured to Miller, her voice calm. "We're about to clear the danger zone." Miller nodded and gripped the yoke firmly, his trust in Rachel absolute. The plane then threaded its way through the narrow opening in the dense clouds, inching out of the savage turbulence. Pressure and altitude stabilized, and below, passengers exhaled in collective relief as safety returned. Rachel remained silent, but in her eyes there flickered a quiet pride. She knew more challenges lay ahead, but she had guided them through the greatest storm, both the one outside the window and the one that raged in everyone's minds. The moment the plane finally broke through the last wall of dark clouds, the first gentle rays of morning sunlight streamed into the cabin like a promise of hope and new life. Passengers who had been trapped by fear and doubt now felt a soothing sense of safety, as if they'd just awakened from a long nightmare. In the cockpit, Rachel exhaled a quiet sigh of relief but kept her focus razor sharp. Her hands gripped the yoke steadily, guiding the aircraft toward the clear runway bathed in dawn at Tokyo International Airport. Her eyes were calm and unwavering, like those of a true military pilot, fully in command of the great responsibility she'd just shouldered. Beside her, Captain Miller looked across at Rachel with deep admiration and heartfelt gratitude. From the moment she entered the cockpit, he'd lost all doubt about this remarkable woman's extraordinary skill and courage. He spoke softly, his voice sincere. "I've flown thousands of flights, but I've never seen anyone handle an emergency as brilliantly as you did today. Thank you, Rachel." Rachel gave him a small, gentle smile, her features softening but remaining composed and resolute. She nodded ever so slightly and replied in a clear, quiet voice, "It was my duty." As the aircraft descended toward the ground, the passengers in the cabin held their breath, their hearts pausing for a moment as they waited for the decisive moment. Todd and Ashley, who had spent the flight sowing doubt and cruelty, now sat in stunned silence, their eyes avoiding the stares of their fellow travelers. Their faces were ashen, shame and regret written plainly across their features as they realized their own baseless prejudice had only fueled needless panic. Then the soft, steady thump of wheels touching the runway echoed through the cabin, signaling that the plane had landed safely at Tokyo International. Instantly, the cabin erupted in pure, unrestrained joy. Applause thundered in every corner, mingling with cheers and tears of relief to form the most moving symphony many had ever heard. In that moment, Mike quietly wiped tears from his eyes, his heart heavy with shame, as he thought back on his earlier actions. He looked toward the cockpit door with deep respect and gratitude. Silently, he vowed to make amends, deleting the misleading videos he'd posted and offering Rachel his sincerest apology, whether she heard it or not. Meanwhile, Todd and Ashley remained frozen in their seats like statues. No one spoke to them, but the looks they received were sharper and more piercing than any rebuke. They understood they had been entirely wrong, yet their pride and long-held prejudices kept them from voicing an apology. Todd bowed his head, his hands trembling in his lap. Ashley dared not lift her gaze, her eyes fixed on empty space as if seeking escape from the shame that enveloped her. The cockpit door slowly opened, and Rachel stepped out with a grace and composure that betrayed no hint of the life and death struggle she had just endured. All eyes turned to her, filled with gratitude and admiration. But Rachel did not pause for applause or recognition. She simply walked to seat 9A, bent to retrieve her small canvas bag, and cast Harold a gentle, thankful glance before moving on. Harold offered her a warm, knowing smile. He understood that Rachel needed no thanks and no one needed to remember her name. Her courage, dignity, and compassion spoke louder than any words ever could. Rachel headed straight for the aircraft's exit, never once looking back. Her figure receded into the bustling throng of disembarking passengers, leaving behind the image of a silent hero who had saved them all without seeking acknowledgement or reward. Outside, the morning sun shone more brightly, as if welcoming a fresh start for everyone on that storm-tossed flight. Todd and Ashley still sat behind, their eyes downcast in remorse at having let their own bias steer them into an almost irreparable mistake. In their silence, they finally felt the smallness and narrowness of their own hearts. One by one, the other passengers disembarked, each stepping into the terminal with a sense of profound relief, boundless gratitude, and deep respect for Rachel. They didn't know where she had come from, or where she would go next, but they all understood that she was the one who had given them their second chance at life. Mike was the last to leave the plane, his emotions raw. He paused at the end of the jet bridge and watched Rachel's figure fade into the crowd at Tokyo International. In that moment, he made himself a solemn vow. Never again would he let prejudice and thoughtlessness harm another person. And Rachel, ever serene, blended into the sea of travelers, leaving no trace but her unwavering calm. She knew her mission was complete, and what remained was the quiet pride and deep peace in her heart, knowing she had done what was right. Just hours after the aircraft touched down safely at Tokyo International Airport, the story of the mysterious woman known as Rachel Evans swept across the internet like wildfire. Videos shot by Mike and other passengers, especially the footage of Rachel calmly walking into the cockpit amid the crisis, immediately became the focus on every social platform. But what outraged people even more were Todd and Ashley's vicious racist remarks. Clips showing Todd blocking the cockpit doorway and spewing hateful slurs at Rachel, along with Ashley's cruel insults about her skin color and appearance, went viral almost instantly. The footage was shared relentlessly, accompanied by an outpouring of angry, indignant commentary from around the globe. Major news outlets dove in, running headlines like, "Skyborne Racism," "Two Passengers Insult Black Pilot Who Saved Flight," and "Shocking Truth of the Heroine Who Faced Prejudice to Rescue Over 200 Passengers." Within a single day, Rachel Evans had become an international media sensation, a new symbol of courage and dignity in the face of injustice and bias. Meanwhile, Todd faced swift, severe consequences for his actions. The company where he held an executive position announced his immediate termination under intense public pressure. In an official statement, the company declared, "We do not tolerate any form of racist behavior or language. After reviewing the extensive evidence and widely circulated videos, we have decided to terminate Mr. Todd Spencer's employment effective immediately. We sincerely apologize and hope the public understands that Mr. Spencer's actions do not reflect our values." Todd sat alone in his office, his head bowed, hands trembling over his face. He'd never imagined that his bigoted tirade would cost him his career, reputation, and self-respect so quickly. A flood of critical calls and furious messages from friends and colleagues made him realize this mistake would haunt him for life. Ashley, too, faced her own social media firestorm. Her personal account was inundated by thousands of angry users condemning her racially charged comments and callousness toward Rachel. The hashtag #CancelAshley trended across major platforms, forcing her into virtual lockdown, ashamed and afraid to leave her home. She sat scrolling through her phone, face ashen as she read the stream of furious comments from strangers. "Aren't you ashamed, Ashley? Rachel saved everyone aboard, including you. Can you believe in the 21st century people like this still exist? It's pathetic." Panic and despair overwhelmed Ashley. She realized her public image was permanently tarnished. Now, she had to face the fallout of her thoughtless cruelty. Public outrage extended beyond Todd and Ashley. Many criticized the airline and media for failing to issue any public apology to Rachel. A wave of petitions and hashtags, #Justice for Rachel, #Rachel the Real Hero, demanded that both the airline and press formally apologize. Urgent press conferences were called. Airline executives took to the cameras to apologize, promising a thorough investigation and an earnest effort to locate Rachel and express their regret. But Rachel had vanished. No one knew where she'd gone or how to contact the enigmatic woman. Every attempt to find her personal information failed. She seemed determined to stay out of the spotlight. Some fellow passengers, most notably Harold and Mike, stepped forward publicly to praise Rachel's bravery, extraordinary skill, and noble character. Mike even appeared on a live television program, tears in his eyes and remorse in his voice. I was wrong to feed the prejudice and film negative clips of her. Rachel Evans not only saved my life, but made me realize how wrong I was. I sincerely apologize to her, even though she deserves no apology from any of us. Mike's heartfelt confession deepened the public's empathy and admiration for Rachel. She became a powerful emblem, proof that courage and talent should never be judged by skin color or appearance. Though Todd and Ashley paid a steep price for their words and deeds, the public continued to call for vigilance, reminding society that racism and prejudice remain ever present and must be eradicated. Rachel never reappeared. She quietly returned to normal life, retreating into a peaceful anonymity, far from both curious onlookers and accolades. For Rachel, the only reward she needed was the knowledge that she had done right by her values all those years, and above all, she cherished the simple, lasting peace that comes from knowing she'd made a difference. As the public outcry grew, Demanding justice and an official apology to Rachel Evans, the media turned its focus to the past of this enigmatic woman. Everyone wondered, what forged someone so strong and steadfast that she could endure vicious insults and deep-seated prejudice, only to save more than 200 lives on that fateful flight? At the same time, several passengers, especially Harold, Mike, and Captain Miller, decided they owed Rachel not only their gratitude, but a truthful account of her story to the world. Harold, still filled with respect after discovering Rachel's military flight log, reached out to former comrades in the Air Force. Long, careful phone calls gradually yielded precious information. After days of persistence, Harold finally contacted retired Colonel James Montgomery, the very officer who had commanded Rachel during her service. They met in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. At the mention of Rachel Evans's name, the colonel's aged eyes lit up with emotion. Rachel Evans? It's been a long time since anyone's brought up that name. She was one of the finest pilots to serve under me, and perhaps the bravest person I've ever known. Harold sensed the colonel's sincerity and bowed forward respectfully. Could you share more about her? The world wants to know the truth. Colonel Montgomery sighed, his gaze serious and somber. Rachel was the pride of our Air Force. During her entire career, she flew dozens of perilous missions, saving hundreds of comrades on the battlefield thanks to her exceptional skill. But then one day, she chose to expose a bitter truth about systemic racism in our unit. The colonel paused, sorrow flashing across his face as he sipped his coffee and continued in a hushed tone. At that time, our unit suffered a catastrophic failure during a classified mission in Oregon. Several black pilots didn't receive timely support from their commanders, putting their lives at grave risk. Rachel was the only one with the courage to speak out against the deep-rooted discrimination in our chain of command. Harold listened in solemn silence, his heart heavy. The colonel's eyes brimmed with both regret and respect. But instead of receiving backing, Rachel was betrayed by her superiors. She was forced to leave the service under unjust circumstances. All her records, her stellar achievements were wiped clean as if she'd never existed. Rachel disappeared from everyone's view, and we all believed she sought peace after enduring such hardship. Harold shared this account with Mike and Captain Miller. Together, they collaborated with major media outlets to shine a light on Rachel's proud yet painful past. Headlines soon read, "Heartbreaking Past of Heroine Rachel Evans, Top Military Pilot Forced Out for Fighting Racism." The public was stunned by the revelations. Rachel was no longer just the hero of Flight 472. She had become a powerful symbol of courage and perseverance in the fight against social injustice. Mike stood before a bank of cameras at a special press conference, his voice full of emotion, yet strong and clear. Rachel Evans saved our lives despite facing vicious insults and discrimination. She was an outstanding pilot who paid a steep price simply for standing against injustice in the military. We owe it to her to tell the truth and restore the respect she deserves. Captain Miller also spoke on camera, his tone grave and sincere. On that flight, Rachel Evans proved to me and everyone that prejudice and racism are far more dangerous than a brave, talented woman. I extend my deepest thanks to Rachel, who taught me so much about life. The public's admiration for Rachel deepened. Many called for systemic reform, especially within the military, so no one else would endure the injustices Rachel faced. Yet Rachel never re-emerged. She remained silent, choosing the sanctuary of her private life while the world honored her with profound respect and boundless gratitude. Perhaps, for Rachel, the greatest reward was knowing her truth was finally told. and that her past suffering could inspire the world to ensure no one else would endure the same. As the wave of public opinion continued to surge, demanding justice and an official apology for Rachel Evans, the media turned its attention to the mysterious woman's past. Everyone wondered, what had forged someone so strong and determined that she could endure vicious insults and deep-seated prejudice, only to ultimately save more than 200 lives on that fateful flight? Meanwhile, several passengers, especially Harold, Mike, and Captain Miller, decided they owed Rachel not only their gratitude, but also a clear and honest account of her story to the public. Harold, still deeply respectful after finding Rachel's military flight log, reached out to some of his former comrades in the Air Force. Lengthy, careful phone calls gradually yielded the first precious pieces of information. After days of patient effort, he finally contacted retired Colonel James Montgomery, the officer who had directly commanded Rachel during her service. Their meeting took place in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. The moment Harold mentioned Rachel Evans's name, the colonel's aged eyes lit up with emotion. Rachel Evans? It's been ages since I've heard that name. She was one of the finest pilots to serve under me and perhaps the bravest person I've ever known. Harold felt the colonel's sincerity and bowed forward respectfully. Colonel, could you share more about her? The whole world wants to know the truth. Colonel Montgomery sighed, his gaze turning solemn and reflective. Rachel was the pride of our Air Force. Throughout her career, she flew dozens of dangerous missions, saving hundreds of comrades on the battlefield thanks to her exceptional skill. But one day, she chose to expose a bitter truth about the severe racism within our unit. The colonel paused, sorrow shadowing his features as he sipped his coffee, before continuing in a lower tone. At that time, our unit faced a critical failure during a classified mission in Oregon. Several black pilots didn't receive timely support from their commanders, putting their lives at grave risk. Rachel was the only one brave enough to call out the persistent racial discrimination in our chain of command. Harold listened in heavy silence, his heart weighed down by the revelation. The colonel's eyes reflected both regret and respect as he added, "Instead of support, Rachel was betrayed by her superiors. She was forced to leave the service under unjust circumstances. All her military records and outstanding achievements were wiped clean, as though she had never existed. Rachel vanished from everyone's view, and we all believed she sought the peace she so richly deserved after enduring such pain." Harold quickly relayed this conversation to Mike and Captain Miller. Together, they worked with major media outlets to bring Rachel's proud but painful history to light. Headlines soon appeared across major news sites. Heartbreaking past of heroine Rachel Evans, top Air Force pilot forced out for fighting racism. The public was shaken by the truth. Rachel became more than the hero of Flight 472. She stood as a powerful symbol of courage and perseverance in the face of social injustice. Mike appeared at a special press conference, looking sincerely into the camera as he spoke emotionally yet firmly. Rachel Evans saved our lives despite enduring vicious insults and discrimination. She was an outstanding pilot who paid too high a price merely for standing up against wrongful prejudice in the military. We have a responsibility to share her story and restore the respect she is due. Captain Miller also addressed the media, his voice steady and heartfelt. On that flight, Rachel Evans showed all of us that prejudice and racism are far more dangerous than a brave, talented woman. I offer my deepest thanks to Rachel for teaching me so many critical lessons in life. The public's admiration for Rachel deepened still further. Calls grew for systemic reform, especially within the military, to ensure no one else suffers the injustices Rachel endured. Yet Rachel never appeared. She remained silent, choosing the sanctuary of a private, peaceful life, even as the world honored her with profound respect and gratitude. For Rachel, none of this public acclaim mattered as much as knowing her true story had finally been told, and that her past suffering could inspire a world determined to prevent such injustice from happening again. Months passed in silence at the little garage on the outskirts of Oregon. The story of the mysterious woman known only as NV9 gradually faded from the headlines, giving way to life's many other concerns. Rachel had grown comfortable with that quiet. She was content to return to a simple existence, far removed from bright lights, public praise, and the scrutiny of curious onlookers. Each morning, Rachel rose before dawn, slipped into her faded coveralls, and lost herself in the silent rhythm of repairing old cars. The hands that had once danced over aircraft controls now worked just as deftly, patiently, skillfully, under the hood of a vintage sedan. Beneath that humble roof, Rachel found the peace she had long sought. One crisp autumn day, with Oregon sky a clear blue and a gentle breeze rustling the leaves, Rachel was quietly working on a car when another vehicle idled into the garage. The engine cut, and a young woman with soft brown hair stepped out, her eyes widening in recognition. It was Emily, the young mother who had been on that fateful flight, her little girl clutched tightly in her arms during the turbulence. Seeing Rachel, Emily's voice caught in her throat. "Oh my God, you're Rachel, aren't you?" Rachel looked up, momentarily surprised, then settled back into her calm, gentle smile as she set down her wrench. "Yes, that's me. How can I help you?" Tears brimmed in Emily's eyes as she moved closer and grasped Rachel's hand. Her voice trembled with gratitude. I always hoped I'd see you again. I'm Emily, the mother on that flight with my daughter. I want to thank you, Rachel. Thank you for saving our lives." Rachel squeezed her hand softly, her smile warm and steady. "Emily, everyone deserves to be treated with kindness. That's what truly saved us. All of us." Emily wept tears of joyful relief. Looking deeply into Rachel's serene eyes, she finally grasped the power of those simple words. "You taught me a profound lesson about life, Rachel. We were wrong to judge you so quickly, but your kindness and courage showed us our mistake. I will never forget it." Rachel simply nodded, her quiet smile conveying everything Emily needed to know. She was a true hero. That evening, determined that Rachel's story deserved to be heard, Emily sat at her computer and shared their reunion on social media. "Rachel didn't just save us on that flight," Emily wrote. "She taught me invaluable lessons about courage, the power of compassion, and most of all, the danger of racial prejudice we all carry, whether we realize it or not. Rachel chose a humble life, shunning fame and accolades, but to me, she will always be the greatest hero I've ever known." Emily's post went viral once more, spreading across platforms and inspiring people worldwide. Rachel's legacy had grown deeper. She was no longer just a life-saving pilot, but a living symbol of human dignity and the courage to stand against injustice. Yet, Rachel remained unchanged. She continued her quiet, unassuming life, far from the world's applause. For her, the greatest reward was the inner peace she had found long ago. Under that modest Oregon garage roof, Rachel worked each day, embracing the simple life she chose. And somewhere in her heart she carried an unshakable belief that if each of us holds kindness, courage, and compassion in our hearts, the world will grow a little brighter. That has been the journey of Rachel Evans, NV9, throughout her life. And that is why she will forever be a hero in our hearts. Rachel's story may come to an end, but its message of bravery, kindness, and the fight against prejudice lives on in each of us. Through her journey, we learn that anyone can be a hero if they have the courage to stand up for what is right. What about you? Have you ever experienced or witnessed a story like Rachel's? Share your experiences in the comments below to help spread this meaningful message. If you found this story valuable, please like and share this video so more people can hear it, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.